This is Your Superior Self, episode 61, turning experts into thought leaders with global credibility expert Mitchell Levy.
Way to think about it is when you're sitting on your deathbed, right, and you look at what you've been able to do in life. Have I raised the family the way I wanted, if I wanted a family? Have I empowered as many people as I can? Have I added value? Did I do that one startup if I wanted to do that, right? When you're sitting on your deathbed, have you had a chance to do the things that you wanted to do?
What is going on, Superior Nation? Welcome back to your favorite source of inspiration, your favorite source of motivation, your favorite podcast, Your Superior Self. I'm your host, Trey Downs, and I want to welcome you to the show. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for hanging out with me tonight. It means a lot to me. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, please hit subscribe. Please leave a rating and a review. It helps the show. It helps me get to more people like you who want inspiration, who want motivation. I'm excited tonight to get into it and dive deep with my guest, Mitchell Levy. But before we get into the interview, I want to talk about this week's quote, the reading that I want to talk about. And it really hit me when I first heard it. I actually took the time to write it on my whiteboard in the office so I can look at it every day. But I was doing some research for a upcoming guest. His name is Philip McKiernan. And he said this quote on an interview that he was on previously. So I brought it up in the interview and he was like, yeah, that's in the Bible. I had no clue, so I went and researched a little bit and come to find out it's actually in the Gospel of Thomas. Now, most of you, all of you probably don't know, but my middle name is Thomas. So it immediately spoke to me because, one, I feel like I battle with this feeling of, or this fight within myself of, what are you doing right now? What are you trying to achieve? Are you doing the right thing? Are you wasting your time? What's the point? I mean, that is the ongoing battle that is inside of me every day. And I read this quote, and I'll read it to you right now. If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And I really stopped dead in my tracks and really listened to myself read that and really let the words sink in, because it was permission to pursue my dreams. It was permission to pursue my passion. And I've always questioned whether or not I should do that, whether I should risk failing. Should I risk looking like an idiot? Should I risk embarrassing myself? Should I risk anything at all? But there's always been this feeling inside of me of this possibility of greatness, of this possibility of happiness, of this possibility of this pursuit of self-betterment. And there is not a map in sight. There's nothing that I can kind of look at to guide myself through this journey. I just have a ton of questions. I doubt myself. I question myself. And this quote basically squashed those doubts and gave me permission to pursue all that I want to pursue. And if I fail, I fail. But I know deep down that if I fail, I will get back up and I will try again. And I will keep going and I will keep learning and I will pivot and I will continue down that road for the rest of my life, trying to achieve my goal, which is to create a podcast that will influence and motivate others to be the best version of themselves. Now, I am not the perfect example by any means. I am in this with you. I am getting better with you. I am taking notes when I interview guests on my show. I am learning when you're learning. trust me when I tell you, when I started this mission, when I started this path of success, I was by far nowhere near where I need to be. When I started this mission, I had so much doubt inside of myself. I had no confidence. I had no vision for the future. I was comfortable in my life. I pretty much shook myself and was like, you have to do something. You have to get better. You have to do this. And I hope that you do the same. I hope that you hear this and you gain motivation to do something small, to do something big, regardless, that you choose to do something in your life that will better it for yourself, will better it for others in your life. It doesn't have to be something crazy. It doesn't have to be something gigantic. It could be the smallest of small, but taking that first step is key, and that builds momentum. And I hope that this does that for you. I'm fired up now. I'm ready to get after it. I am excited about today's episode. I'm excited about today's guest, Mitchell Levy. Mitchell is an accomplished entrepreneur who has created 20 businesses in Silicon Valley, including 4 publishing companies that have published over 800 books. Mitchell is a TEDx speaker and an international best-selling author of over 60 business books. He's provided strategic consulting to over 100 companies. He has advised over 500 CEOs on critical business issues and has been chairman of the board of a NASDAQ-listed company. So without further ado, here is my interview with Mitchell Levy. What is going on, Superior Nation? I have a special guest tonight. His name is Mitchell Levy. He is the AHA guy who empowers experts, thought leaders, and businesses to share their genius. Mitchell, welcome to Your Superior Self, buddy.
Oh, it is great to be here. I'm excited about this conversation.
So tell us about you. What are you up to today? What is Mitchell Levy's business today?
You know, we work with busy, successful professionals who want to have more success in their lives. They realize that they either want to write their first book or have their next book done, and they just don't have the time. So we write, we ghostwrite, we publish, and we make them an Amazon best-selling author. We do that in 4 months. And over that 4-month period, we need about 5 hours of the author's time. In essence, Trey, we're pressing the easy button and we're saving them 310 hours.
Wow. So I don't know if all my audience knows exactly what a ghostwriter is. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I could probably the best way to do it is I'll do it through the example, because there are many different types of ghostwriters. It's when you look at most big celebrities or most big books out there, and there's a co-author there's a big name and a co-author. Typically it means the co-author did all the work, and the big name is just putting their name on it. Now it could range from one of those things where there's lots of conversations going back and forth, or sometimes people dictate their book into a location and then people type it out. Let me talk about what I do, which is a little bit different, actually a whole lot different. Our books, and if you go to the website, ahathat.com, we have there, the site is free to use, free to share. It's a way in which you could find content to share on social media. I have 47,000 pieces of content that you could share today for free. And what happens is I've redefined the concept of a book, because what books today are different than they were 10 years ago. Books today are really that credibility piece. It's that piece of, it's kind of like getting your PhD, or if you think about it, getting your high school degree, your college degree, your PhD, whatever it is that gets you that next step forward. Having a book in your name that shows you as an expert at what you do, that's a beautiful thing. And the point is, it doesn't really matter what's inside, because a lot of times people are not reading books. Even they may be listening to audiobooks. So what we do instead is we're summarizing our books. We're summarizing the thought process of the expert. And our books have 140 bite-sized quotes. So it is the way people want to consume data, short sound bites that are compelling. And so I'll hold up a couple books. I did a TED Talk The TED Talk is called Being Seen and Being Heard as a Thought Leader. Nice, beautiful book. Color is orange on the outside. Another book from a friend of mine, Bill Wallace, runs a group in Dallas called Success North Dallas. If you look on the inside of our book, we print in color, and then we have 140 bite-sized quotes, 140 quotes that really help emphasize instead of having to waste time reading a book that's going to take you weeks or months and tens of hours to read, you could read one of our books in 15 minutes. But let me do something different. Let me tell you about Bill Wallace, probably one of the most amazing servant leader I've ever heard. He's this guy he's really all about the people we work with. He's been running a group in Dallas called Success North Dallas, a nonprofit, for 30 years. He was sitting on a manuscript that was, I think, 50,000 words long for 3 years. He knew it wasn't right. He couldn't publish it. I did a 3-hour interview with Bill. And from there, my ghostwriter then came up with the summary of the book. We broke the book into 7 sections. So we had section descriptions and the 140 bite-sized quotes. And Bill is like the most happiest man on the earth because he now has a book and he spent a fraction. Imagine 3 years, 50,000 words, how much time he spent. We did the 3-hour interview, probably another 2, 3, 4 hours reviewing content. He has a book. He is so happy. So one of the things you might say is, well, a book of quotes, that's not powerful. Well, Trey, let me tell you, my favorite, I've curated about 150,000 aha messages. I'm going to tell you my favorite aha message of all time is from this book. It's aha number 3. It'll change your life once you hear it. Are you ready for me to change your life?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Change my life, please.
So this is what Bill Wallace says, and it's very simple. Living a good life is determined by the smiles that appear on others' faces as you enter a room and stay in their faces after you leave.
I love that.
Don't we all want to live that good life? Right? And that's, to me, and his books about servant leadership, it reinforces his messaging. Every book has 140 of those that are really reinforcing the message of the author. And then if you go to the AHA That platform, AHATHAT.com, you'll see that you now can share those messages to your followers on social media. And it helps reinforce that you're seeing what's going on in the world and sharing stuff that you think is important.
How did you get here, Mitchell? Like, how are you in the business that you're in today? Like, tell me that process.
So, I don't think for most people, life is not a straight line. You don't start at A and say, I'm going to go to B and you get there. When I was young, so high school age, my parents were divorced. My mom was a single mom with 3 kids. We didn't feel that way, but we were poor, right? And mom was a school teacher, not a lot of money, but she gave us 2 things. She gave us love, and she also gave us the attitude that the sky is the limit. We could do whatever we set our minds to, right? Which is really amazing. Everything else in life, to me, was serendipity. Everything else to me was some present was handed to me. I saw the present and I accepted. So I ended up choosing to go to one and only one college. It was by my grandparents in Florida. So I went to the university. I applied to the University of Miami. I got in, got a scholarship there. That was fascinating. I really came into my own at that stage. I then decided I wanted to get an MBA. So the University of Miami was 1 year long. The College of William and Mary, which was one other place I applied, was 2 years. So I applied for both. I got into both. Just turns out during the summer of that year, I was in Europe. So I hadn't seen the acceptance letter to the College of William and Mary. So as we're driving at the time, my parents had moved to Philadelphia. So as we're driving from Philadelphia, we stopped at the College of William and Mary. And if you've ever been to William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia, it is a beautiful campus. I fell in love with the campus. So I went to we kept going, got to the University of Miami, checked into the dorms, got on the phone. By the way, this is when there were still payphones, right? Do you guys remember those days? So got on the phone, called the dean at the College of William and Mary, told him I was away for the summer, and they had offered me a half tuition fellowship to go to the College of William and Mary. It's 2 years long, half tuition fellowship. And he said, "Well, give me a second." He comes back. He goes, "Mitchell, we really like you here at this school. Tell you what we'll do. We'll give you a full tuition fellowship if you're interested." Now, I was, instead of jumping up and down and say, "Holy cow, yes," I then said to myself, "Well, your college is 2 years long, and I only got a year at Miami. What can you do about that?" He goes, "Oh, I'll take a semester off." I'm like, "Done." Okay. So I then went to the College of William and Mary, got my MBA. By the way, if you're going to a 2 year MBA program from undergrad, what was interesting in undergrad, what happened for me, which was pretty crazy, is that first semester, I was a terrible student in high school. I just somehow woke up at college. So I ended up getting two B's and all A's my first semester of college. I ended up getting one B in all A's the second semester. And for the rest of my college career, I got all A's. So when I went to the College of William and Mary, I wanted to make sure that it wasn't just the University of Miami. So I ended up that first semester, I got all A's there too. I have to tell you though, in undergraduate, there's always a answer in the back of the book, right? There's, no matter what you do, there's just an answer there. So there's a right and a wrong. What happens when you get to grad school, there is no answer. You just have to define it. So the first semester, which by the way got chopped off for me, was the semester where they actually teach you how to transition from no answer. So I was thrown in, because I had that first semester taken off. I was thrown in with second years, and man, I was not a good partner. Because I hadn't quite got it yet, right? So what was fascinating is my last semester at William and Mary, I ended up doing an independent study for a faculty member. It's a finance guy, and he was trying to prove a new way of doing stock trading. And so at 2 in the morning or 2:30 in the morning, I came up with a proof to his formula. And we don't have to go into the details, but it was very fascinating. And so that next day I submitted to him. He's excited. I spent about a week or two, come back about 2 weeks later. I said, "Hey, listen, I just started writing an article. I want to publish this." And he looked at me and says, "No, we're not going to publish an article." I go, "Huh?" He said, "Well, I just used your research. I got a job at Colonial Mutual Fund, and you're coming with me." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Right. So that's how I got to Boston. And, what was fascinating is, although I was happy to have the job, he was not when I did my TED talk, I talked about him. He sort of had a hedonistic approach to life, and it's a little bit narcissistic. And so it turns out that he wasn't a good role model or a mentor. So I was only with him for a year, and kind of what I said in my TED talk, he stayed with me for 13. So it took me a while to get over that. I moved to another company, it was State Street Bank in Boston. And then one day I met a girl on a bus stop, and through a number of serendipity locations, her continuing to bump into her being best friends with one of my best friends in high school. And next thing we know, she moves to California, and 6 months later, I followed her, and a year and a half after that, we get married, and we've been married for 29 years. And so serendipity brought me to California. Turns out my parents were 15 minutes away, so that was pretty interesting. And I'd say every step along the way. So, by the way, I come to California, I go to Silicon Valley, and we all hear that the streets in Silicon Valley are paved with gold. So I went to a startup. I thought all startups were successful, but it turns out I went to a startup that of 3 business models, 2 of the 3 were flawed. So I was there for a year before they went out of business. And I kind of went to my parents and I said, "All right, what's next?" What my parents said were, "Hey, why don't you go to a company with a big brand? And then if it's a big enough company, you can move around and you can figure out what you like." I'm like, okay. So it turns out that my brother knew a guy at Sun Microsystems. He introduced me to somebody else. And next thing I know, I'm working at Sun Microsystems. And I spent 9 years there. And that was a really great brand. The Sun was one of the big companies behind the proliferation of the internet that we know today. And and what was interesting is somewhere in there, we're going to get to the really cool stuff soon. Somewhere in there, I realized that I didn't like working for a big company. I didn't like working for a ship that I couldn't control the destination, particularly when I didn't like the choices made by the executive staff. So I ended up going to a mentor. And by the way, one of my rules in life, so here's something to think about, an aha moment I want to drop. If you went through life with one mentor and two mentees, you'd be a significantly better person. It is just an absolutely beautiful way to learn from somebody else. And by the way, that somebody else might be your mentees, and to grow is having that mentor mentee relationship. So I ended up having, I think it was my boss's boss ended up mentoring me. And I said, I don't think I want to stay here my whole life. What do I do? And he gave me a roadmap. And the roadmap was just a way that I can figure out where I wanted to go. And what I ultimately decided on is I wanted to be part of an executive team of a company where I could help chart the course of its success. And what I hadn't realized, and it took, by the way, it took me a couple of years. Once I figured that out, I realized a couple of things that I was missing. And so it took me a couple of years to figure it out. And then in 1997, I left Sun Microsystems. And oh, by the way, in 1996, I was working, even though I was at Sun, I did some work with a nonprofit. I got a chance there to meet Mark Cuban and speak with him at Comdex. So he was on the panel with me at Comdex. I got a chance to meet Jeff Bezos. I booked him into our conference in 1996. Amazon was, I think, just Series B had just happened. So everyone thought he was crazy. So it was kind of interesting. In 1997, the dot-com thing was happening. I said, I'm gonna open up my own business. I'm going to be a strategic consultant focused on the internet. And I'm going to help companies figure out how to do this. So I hang up my shingle. I left Sun Microsystems. I hang up my shingle, strategic consultant, started talking to my friends. And one of my old bosses said to me, Mitchell, do you know anything about SEO? And I go, well, no, I don't really know anything about SEO. By the way, once again, each step along the way, serendipity, right? So I go, I don't know anything about SEO, but here's where many people, when they receive a present, they turn it away. I honestly, with 100% of my core, I knew that I did not want to do SEO. I did not want something so, in my mind, so low level. I want to do high level strategic stuff. But here's a guy who said, Mitchell, clients are asking me for this. I don't want to have anyone in my company do it. I know you could figure it out. So my response was, his name was Rick. Sure, Rick, here's what we'll do. Let me research what's out there and let me come back to you. Now, by the way, in 1997, researching SEO was not that hard. So I bought everything on the market. I learned everything I could. And I came back to him and said, here's what we should do. Why don't you charge your clients $15,000? I'll charge you 10. And he said yes, and we sold 5. And what was fascinating is, in order to do SEO at the time, so search engine optimization, what you would do is I'd go to the person I was talking with and I'd go, tell me your 30-second elevator pitch. Now, I'm sure you've done this with your audience before. 30 seconds means 30 seconds, not longer. When somebody says, give me your 3-second summary, that's 3 seconds. Normally I say, give me your 3-second summary. They take 10 minutes, right? So give me your 30-second elevator pitch. Each one of the 5 people took 10 minutes. I go, oh, that's interesting. 2 of them became clients, in addition to the SEO stuff. And so that's kind of how my business birthed. And from there, it was just serendipity. I started teaching at San Jose State University. I got so busy that I went in to quit. And one of the things what happens with me is when I go in to quit, I never say I'm leaving. I say, hey, listen, I have to do more or I have to do less. Right? Because I just couldn't have figured out, I was getting paid really well to teach at San Jose, but I was doing all this other stuff. I couldn't find the time. And the dean said to me, Mitchell, why don't you create a executive business program for us? I go, okay, that's interesting. Let me think about that. Why don't we set up a meeting 3 weeks from now? So I set up a meeting 3 weeks from now. When I came back, here's what I said. This was, by the way, in the heart of the dot com days. I think it was 1998. And I came back and said, listen, we need to teach people about e-commerce. Let's create a program called e-commerce management. I'm going to create 30 courses for you. I'm going to create it for free. Here's the outline. Here's what you need to get a certificate, blah, blah, blah. And really, I don't want you to pay me anything. I just want you to give me a piece of the door. And what I asked for was 25% of the door. The dean actually laughed at me because nobody had ever been successful at creating anything. And so he just thought I was being stupid. They rushed really quickly to sign the contract. They was not as happy when we, over the next couple of years, we sold 4,700 course seats and took in over 2 million. They were not as happy as writing the checks, which seems silly for me because they wouldn't have got any checks in the first place. But anyhow, so that was great. I then ended up the largest conference company at the time. They also asked me to run some conferences. I did that. I was asked to join the board of a public company. So I'm a fan of adding service first. So one of my friends kept asking me ideas and favors, and I every couple of months he'd bounce ideas off me, and then one day he said, Mitchell, you've been acting like a board member for a couple of years. Why don't you join my board? I'm like, okay, right. So I think what happens, if I'm going to summarize the story, and then I'll fast forward to where we are now. Every step along the way in life, somebody has handed a present. And the question is, do you actually see it as a present, or do you see it as something that's a pain or in the way, or do you just completely not even hear it? And what I'm doing now, so I'm going to just fast forward. There's all this fun stuff in the middle too, but you did say 15 minutes, so I think I'm running close on that time frame. What happened is I was a publisher, a book publisher. So I did the dot com stuff when the dot com crash happened. Man, that was overnight. The money I was making went to zero. Like nobody wanted to spell the word e-commerce, right? You got to be ready. I was running another company called CEO Networking. It was making a small amount of money at the time, relatively, but all of a sudden I looked at that money. I go, oh, this is pretty good, right? Because everything else went to zero. So I started publishing in 2005 because what I saw happening was the democratization of book publishing. I saw it's just easier for people who want to publish books to do that. And between 2005 and 2017, I published over 800 books. And Trey, what I'll tell you is I realized I was serving the wrong audience. And how I came to that conclusion is in 2016, I started a social media enabled ebook platform. That's what that is today. And so I was running a Kickstarter. The Kickstarter hit 250% of goal. Now, how you can make a Kickstarter successful is you take a product or service you offer today and you offer it at a discount. So I had got to the point where I always thought my job was to make it easier for authors to write. So I got to the point where I have a 3-step writing process and somebody could write a book in 8 hours. So as far as the Kickstarter was concerned, 20 people paid us that when they wrote their book, we would publish it. So fast forward to the end of 2017. I was asked to do a TED Talk, which, by the way, was absolutely beautiful. For those, if you just Google Mitchell Levy TED Talk, you'll be able to see it. It's on YouTube. And it got me thinking about the world in a different way. But then I looked at the results between the end of 2016 and 2017, the 20 people who paid us that they'd write a book and we'd publish it. 2 people actually wrote their book. So then I went to 5 of them and said, listen, what if I write it for you? And one of them said yes. So now I say 3 people wrote the book, but let's do the corollary. 17 people couldn't find 8 hours in a 12-month period to do something they paid for that would be beneficial for them. I have to tell you, that really annoyed me. Not that they didn't do it. It just bothered me. I don't want to sell stuff people don't use. It doesn't hit with my core. What made it worse I went to my friends in the online learning space. I went to my friends in the internet marketing space. Now, Trey, if you think that sounded bad, wait till you hear this. Here's what they said to me. They go, Mitchell, did you realize that 3 out of 20 is a 15% utilization rate? And that is really good. Okay, that's when I got really concerned. So that's when I started in 2018. What we're doing today is we're writing for other people because I can guarantee that I'm going to write your book and make it an Amazon bestseller in 4 months. But I didn't get there. And by the way, what's nice is 2018 was to figure out how to do it, put the mechanics in place, make things work. 2019, I call it the year of the partner. Because when people come to me, when an author comes to me, they don't come to me because their pain point is I need a book, Mitchell. What they come to me is they want more business. I mean, that's what we're in business today, mate. We're in life today to have fun, to do what we like, to get paid for it. And if you're running your own business, your job is to help satisfy a pain point for other people. And one of the things your pain point is not you need a book. Your pain point is you need more clients. So what I did at the end of 2018 is I interviewed 100 potential partners and I picked up 25. And so now what happens is when I'm talking with an author or a potential author, I can guarantee that we'll have the book ready and they'll spend 5 hours in that 4 month period. They'll be an Amazon best-selling author. It'll be a very compelling book. And what I'll also tell them is, well, what else do you need? Right? Do you want to use LinkedIn as a tool to help set up calendar appointments? Do you want to use Facebook? Do you want to use Instagram? How about being a speaker? I got a speaker coach who will guarantee certain results. I've got a firm that will do a 10-city tour. So if you actually wanted to go to 10 different cities and have everything arranged for you, I got a firm that could do that. So what's interesting now is my current title, the way I call myself, it's a global credibility expert. I'm giving you the credibility of the book, and I'm also only partnering with people who can really, truly deliver the results they talk about. And so you asked me before we started, how was my day? It was phenomenal because all I'm doing is helping people be that much more successful. I always wanted to do that. So fundamentally, I always wanted to help people be successful. What happened during the dot-com days, the big mistake I made was that I focused everything around Mitchell Levy, right? I actually had to be in the room teaching the class or running the conference or running the overall program or doing the consulting. I didn't do enough leverage. So when I ended up starting book publishing in 2005, huge leverageability. But I made one big mistake there, and that is I didn't focus on Mitchell Levy as a thought leader. Typically what happens with book publishers, they all want to create the next Chicken Soup of the Soul series, right? So I created 4 different companies, all chicken soup quality type stuff. And because I was spread so thin, I didn't push the brand Mitchell Levy. I was pushing each of the brands of the publishers. So when book publishing really became well known, it became democratized. Everyone kept doing it. When people were writing about it, they didn't think about me because I had all these different companies. So I started focusing on thought leadership and where I am now, and I'm combining both. I've got this platform that's ultimately flexible. I've got the ability to really, anyone who wants to actually have a book in their hands to be successful, because you become, what you're doing with your book is you're really attracting people to get excited about you. That's what a book does. And then they either talk to you or you enroll them in a course, or there's a step ladder of things you do. But the book is what's typically called, they call it a tripwire. The book is that thing that gets people's attention in the first place. And so I've got this platform on that's leverageable. I got book publishing, which is leverageable. And now I've got all these partners that I'm bringing into the equation. So when I now talk to people, I not only give them the book, but I also give them opportunities to do things with people who are guaranteeing their results. It's so much, the world is becoming really beautiful because we could touch and interact with people around the world.
I love your story and I love your energy.
Thank you.
You talk about serendipity a lot in your story. You talk about the successes. Talk about a time in your life where you felt stuck, like you weren't seeing the signs, the presents weren't being presented to you. Like what give me an exact moment in your life where you felt like you didn't know the next
You
step.
know, I don't know if I could point to a particular next step, but what I'll say, so let me repeat what I said. Between 2005 and 2017, that's 12 years, or is that 13 years? Anyhow, I actually was serving the wrong audience. So there are many times in that model that I I probably maybe presents were coming to me. I actually had people at different points in time tell me that my model needs to change. So I would say that I probably fell prey like everyone else in the world that the world was moving in another direction and I just hadn't seen it. I didn't want to be labeled at the time as a self-publisher.
At any point, did you want to give up?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, actually when when thank you, good question. I needed a prompt. When when book publishing really became democratized, and I'm trying to think, I don't know the exact date. It might have been like 2011, 2012, 13, around that time frame when it really became democratized. I'm like, oh man, I'm going to sell my publishing companies. I'm going to become I on LinkedIn, I call myself a thought leader architect. I'm going to go back to consulting. I had fun doing that. I'm going to give away my publishing or sell my publishing company. So I actually sold my first publishing company, and then I got my first client as a once again, the title was cool, Thought Leader Architect. The problem is nobody understood what that meant. But I created the title. I was the first thought leader architect in the world. I got my first client, sold my first publishing company, had three others to sell. And that client was so enamored by the fact that I knew publishing in and out. I realized that publishing needed to be part of what I did. Right. But I was close. If the client didn't come as quick, I would have sold the other ones as well. Um, I I'm trying to think about giving up. Yeah, I would say I was making during the dot-com days, typically $7,500 a keynote, $5,000 a day in consulting. And the one day when the dot bomb came, those numbers went to zero. I mean, literally zero. I had no idea what to do. What I mentioned, I was running this company called CEO Networking. It was making 40,000 a year at the time for me, and that was so small in relation to everything else. And all of a sudden, 40,000 looked really good, right? And I at different points, I don't think I ever lose. I don't fundamentally lose faith in me, right? I sometimes fundamentally lose faith in what I'm doing, and because we always kind of think the grass is greener on the other side. So every now and then I'm thinking, man, I wish I was on the other side. And so what I do versus many other people is I don't actually quit what I do and do something else. I will run one or two experiments. So I've done a number of companies, but I don't actually run them like you hear the word serial entrepreneur. I'm a parallel entrepreneur, right? So a good example of how I do this today is I told you I interviewed 100 potential partners. I picked 25. What I'm now doing is I'm going back to the 25 and I'm saying, okay, what experiment should we run? And how do we combine our packages together? And Trey, here's the most important thing in terms of what I do is I've done so many experiments and so many partnerships. You could spend a whole lot of time worrying about contracts and negotiations and all that stuff. And what I often do is say, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what you're going to do. Why don't we split profit? Here's the client. The most important thing is who is the client, that mutual client we're working on? Because what will happen during most every project is shit will hit the fan. And when it does, for me personally, I want to make sure if I'm not in the room, the the partner I'm working with is saying the same sort of stuff I'm saying. And I've only made one mistake that way where I just couldn't believe what was coming out of my partner's mouth. And that was it for our partnership. But most of the time you could tell the character of the person you're working with and what you want to think about as a partnership. Get your first client. I call it your first experiment. Do something together where you both make money, i.e., profitable experiment. And then if you like the experience, like sometimes they may not do something bad, you just didn't like working with a person. Well, you shake hands and you've run a profitable experiment. If you like it and you want to move forward, then put all the contract stuff in place. And to me, I think when I have either doubt in a particular direction, or when I have I want to test drive something new, something better, instead of like what many people do is say, "Hey, I'm all in." They quit their existing job. Like, here's what happens a lot. I'm switching topics if you don't mind. Here's what happens a lot. I've probably coached or been in front of somewhere between 20 to 30,000 people. And I often have somebody who's working as an engineer in Silicon Valley. And they go to me and they say, Mitchell, I'm an entrepreneur. And I go, okay, good. Tell me a little bit. What do you want to do? And it doesn't matter what they say, right? Same thing as an author. It doesn't matter what's in the book. It's what you're going to do with the book. It doesn't matter if you're an angel investor or a VC, what they're looking for people who are extremely excited about what they do, motivated to solve a problem, and flexible enough to change when the market characteristics change. Right. So they're listening to the environment. They're watching the presents that come their way. Right. So I talked to an engineer and they say, I want to be an entrepreneur and I'm ready. How do you start, Mitchell? And then I asked the same question. First, how many hours a week do you work? And if it's anything less than 80, the follow-up question is, how many hours a week do you spend on your entrepreneurial effort? Right? Because if you're working 70 hours a week, you still got an hour a week you could spend on that. If you're working 40 hours a week, you got at least 10 hours you could spend on your entrepreneurial effort. And when people say to me, Mitchell, when I quit my job, that's when I'm doing my entrepreneurial stuff, I say, please don't quit your job. Because what happens is we think about Maslow's hierarchy. We need food and shelter. When you have a company that's paying you money, even if you hate your job and they're paying your money, they are your financial sponsor. And they're putting hopefully enough money in your pocket so you could pay the bills and eat. When you get rid of your financial sponsor, you need to replace that with something else. And business just doesn't turn over immediately. You don't always get lucky and find that right prospect, right? So the important part is if you have an entrepreneurial effort, try it today, particularly when you have a financial sponsor in place. And many people just, oh no, I can't start entrepreneurial stuff until I quit my job. So you're not an entrepreneur if you say those words. Entrepreneurs start today.
Do you like? I hear that term thrown around a lot. Entrepreneur minded. Do you think everybody has this? Do you think it's just a catchphrase?
Honestly, I don't want to say the entire world, because there are components of the population that just really like to serve, right? That really want to either work for somebody else or do something where they're adding value to somebody else's vision. And I can't tell you the percentage of that. What I can tell you though, as 401k plans and retirement plans and all this stuff go by the wayside, the person who cares most about you being successful is you, right? And there's a entrepreneurial spirit in many of us. And so what does that really mean? To me, and let me redefine the term expert, right? To me, an expert is somebody who gets paid to do something. Now, if you only get paid once, so let's take a look about the small girl or boy who sits on the corner and sells lemonade. Somebody comes by and pays a quarter or a dollar for a cup of lemonade, and that happens once, and the same customer never comes back. That means they're doing a really bad product. So I'm not sure you can call them an expert, right? If your customers complain about you and they don't come back, that's a problem. But if you produce a service that's valuable and you get paid for it, and they have word of mouth marketing to help other people come, well, you're an expert. Everyone has expertise. So the question from entrepreneurial component is how can you take the expertise, the thing that you like doing, the thing that you're good at, and how can you make money helping other people do it? That to me is what both an expert is and what an entrepreneurial is. It's whether it's a product or service, it's providing something of value that other people want to pay for. And until you try it, how do you know?
Mm. I love that. And I read a quote today. I was listening to Audible, and I think it was The Way of the Warrior. In the book, he states, what is this quote? Most people would rather live oppressed than pay the price for freedom. And it really hit home for me because it means that a lot of the corporate types rather have that salary than pay the price of being an entrepreneur and having that potential for freedom. And when I say freedom, I mean free from the bondage of having to ask for a vacation day, having to ask for a sick day, having to ask to go see your kid's recital or taking your kids to a ball game. That's the bondage I'm talking about. The bondage of not being able to live your life the way that you want to live it. And people just rather collect the salary. They rather have the matching 401ks than really take a chance on and gamble on themselves.
You know, I have to. So let me take a. So how about I say, Trey? Yes, but yes, and there really are some people who are happy, really happy, doing nothing more than serving. Just tell me what the job is, tell me what success is for you, and I will do that, and you pay me the appropriate price. And I have to say, once again, I can't tell you the percentages, but there's a percentage of the world, and there's nothing wrong with that model. If that's you, there's nothing wrong with it. The way to think about it is when you're sitting on your deathbed, right, and you look at what you've been able to do in life. Have I raised the family the way I wanted? If I wanted a family, have I empowered as many people as I can? Have I added value? Did I do that one startup if I wanted to do that, right? When you're sitting on a deathbed, have you had a chance to do the things that you wanted to do? So for the person who wants to serve and is happy doing that, they're going to get their benefits, their inner selves elsewhere. But I do agree if you have entrepreneurial spirit, if your interest is to create your own thing and be successful at it, or even take somebody else's thing, franchise organization, and be successful at it. That's, by the way, how Ray Kroc got so successful with McDonald's is he reached the American populace who wanted to be their own entrepreneurs, and he gave them a formula. It was the Bible that represented how you run a McDonald's, right? And there's nothing wrong with that either. It's just you got to kind of do it. And so I do agree. I having to ask for vacation and holiday, those concepts are so foreign for me. It's been a long.
When was the last time you asked for a vacation day?
Well, I guess being happily married, I every time I want to do something with my wife, we ask appropriately. But outside of the real boss, which is my wife, last time I worked for a company was 1997. So the only time, and one of the things that happened when my son was 2, I'm in Silicon Valley. We work like 70, 80 hours a week. It was crazy. So he was. Oh no, it was when he was 1 or 1.5. Like the whole year went by, and I barely, even though I work from my house, I barely spent time with him. And I was talking to a bunch of my friends and said, Mitchell, why don't you do this? Why don't you take one day a week and just spend it with your son? And he's now 20. So from the time he was like 1.5 or 2 to he was about 16, every Sunday was Daddy Duncan Day. So I go to my wife and I go, hey, honey, I got a present for you. I'm going to take every Sunday off and I'm going to spend it with Duncan. And she was sharp. She goes, okay, that's good. What about me? Now, I thought this was the present for her because she was like the one taking care of our son. And I hadn't realized from her perspective what a blunder I was making. By the way, one of the best presents I ever gave myself was spending every Sunday with my son. Just spectacular. So I said, give me a couple minutes. I thought about it and I came back and I said, well, what if I take 4 or 5 weeks off every year and we go to some European city? I go, the only caveat is that you book it. You book the travel, and so we have for the last 18 years, we've traveled to Europe, we've rented a house, we invite friends and family to come visit. And we've done that for 18 years. And I don't have to ask anybody. I mean, if it turns out I'm working with a client long term and it overlaps that time frame, I'm like, well, when I was sitting on the board of a company, I was like, I'm going to be in Europe at this time. If there's any board meetings, just connect to me here, right? So I think it's you you really do in life get a chance to make your own world and your own rules, and you just have to go out and try it, right? If you don't you don't know if something's going to work or not unless you try it. I just The biggest thing I'd like to say for most people is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you got a financial sponsor today, trust me, if you're working 40 hours a week, there is no way you can't find some extra time to try something else. Period. And if you really want to be that entrepreneur, just try it. Right.
I think that's a great tip for Daddy Duncan Day. Like I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of startups, a lot of young businesses, the CEOs of those businesses should try that. I mean, I got into it, not an argument, but a discussion with my wife the other day, and I put in a lot of time at work and on the side with the podcast, and she's like, I have 3 kids, and she's like, what was it? She was like, what's your mission, Trey? What are you trying to do? And I'm like, I'm just trying to create something. I'm trying to create my legacy. I'm trying to create something that they'll remember me for. And she's very quick witted, and she already knows. She's setting me up what she's doing.
So she knew where she was headed.
Yeah,
she just had to lead you
she's
there.
like,
Okay.
yeah. I was like, recently I've been kind of neglecting my son, just not on purpose, but just because I've been busy and trying to create stuff. And she's like, well, why don't you try to create him? Why don't you try to create him as a man? And it like hit me like a bag of bricks. I'm like, you don't realize how much you're missing until it's over, right? Until it's gone. And I'm glad that my wife, and I'm sure you feel the same way, that we have strong women in our lives to help us realize that it's not all about making the money, and it's not all about trying to create this huge business, this huge success for ourselves, but it's also leaving our legacy on others, on leaving a legacy on our kids, and creating them as successful individuals and helping them grow up and bringing them up with us. And I think that's a big point, because everybody wants to be an entrepreneur, but they don't know the sacrifices it takes to be an entrepreneur. And then sometimes things get lost. And just my key point here is don't be in the situation I was, where you forget about the ones that you care the most about.
It's you hear this all the time, and it's simply you step back on who you are on your deathbed, and that extra dollar you made doesn't mean anything. It's the people who are around you because they love you and you've added value to them. And I have to tell you, the every Sunday with my son was spectacular. I mean, just beyond spectacular. And I feel as a human that if we left this earth today, he'd be fine. He'd figure it. I mean, obviously, many things happen, but he'd figure it out. I gave him, or we, because I give him the business sense. My wife gives him like the human personality. She's significantly a much better human than I am. So her ability to impart on somebody the core values of just being, in this case, a good servant leader, a good person who can help lead others, but do it with heart. She did that for him. and he's spectacular. So, but the cool part about figuring out how to take a particular day with one of your children every week, or if you could just if you can't do a single day with each kid because that's 3 days, you could figure out a block of time. The coolest thing about that is you're the fun person, and while you're doing the fun stuff, you could also impart some life lessons.
Life lessons. I love that. What's the most important lesson that you want to try and teach your son?
There are many life lessons along the way. It's how old are your kids?
8, 6, and 2 months.
All right. So with your 8-year-old, in about 2 years, what you have to do, and I think I did this with my son at 10. I'm like, Duncan, I'm not going to be able to stop you. If you want to go to the internet and learn and do anything you want, I can't stop you. I'm not going to put all these parental controls in place. But if you really want free access to the internet, you're going to need to allow me to talk to you about internet rules, right? Just good things to think about. Can we have that conversation sometime? And his answer was, yeah, sure, Dad. And so at that stage, we had a conversation. And at 10 years old, think about what life was like when you were 10, right? I mean, what's the best thing we can do is find an old Playboy magazine, right? That's not terribly exciting. Today on the internet, you can find anything you want. And so the lesson I shared then was, at 10 years old, you're going to have to trust me. And one of the things I did with my son is there are 2 modes, dad mode and friend mode. So I'm like, this is friend mode talking. There are just things in life that once you see them, you can't unsee them. And at 10 years old, there's still this naive approach that you have in life. And there's some things on the internet that you just shouldn't see. Can you just trust me? I don't want to stop you from seeing them ever. I just want to, between 10 and 13 or 14, sort of hold you back a little bit. So if you see something that's just a little bit out, even if your friends are looking at it, just walk away. Trust me, you'll be a lot happier, right? And generally speaking, I think he did that one. The biggest thing is for my son is seeing the presence, right? Just being open enough, even during times in which, we have so much going on there, and there's so much adversity. If you keep your eyes open, there's always a present coming your way. And the important component is just being able to see him, being able to recognize
I love
him.
that, man, because what I have been trying to do in my weekly routines, in my weekly disciplines, aside from meditating and working out and doing different things, journaling. Thursdays, what I've been doing is I call it my Omen Day. So I just got done reading The Alchemist, and what I've been doing is kind of, instead of being proactive in the business, proactive in the podcast, I'm kind of like just sitting back and taking it all in and kind of just like looking for signs. Like I won't answer an email. I'll read them. I won't text anybody. I won't make any calls. I'll just let the world come to me and just try to pick out those presents.
Oh, beautiful.
And I'll have a notebook with me and I'll make a list. And anytime I think a present or a gift or an omen arises, I'll write them down. And then later that night, I'll go over all of them and see, if there's anything that sticks out. Because I think that there's so much noise, there's so much fluff out in the world with the internet and Facebook and scrolling that we can't see the presence. It's like this fog of social media. There's this fog of distractions. There's this fog of, everybody talks about, I don't know my direction. It's just like you're not looking.
Yeah, that's beautiful. By the way, you're going to be really, really successful at all that you do because you've got the right components in place.
I really hope so. Not because of, for me, it's just like I strive to be a better father, a better husband. And I feel like if I can find fulfillment in this area of my life, that it will complete me in others, or at least make me a better version of that.
This is interesting. There's a part of me, the reason I said what I said is that I like what I'm hearing about who you are and what you're doing from an overall uh, infrastructure perspective, right? Who you are and stuff. And it feels really good to see what you're doing. And kind of what I'm going to say is uh, give yourself a chance to pat yourself on the back and just say, it's pretty good as is. It's going to get better. I'm going to keep doing more stuff, but every now and then, maybe what you do on Thursdays, maybe the first thing you do on Thursdays, spend the first half hour just talking about why things are so cool, right? And just appreciate, give thanks for the stuff you have at the moment, because having a wife who's as strong as it sounds like, having three kids, man, that by itself is beautiful. Being able to have a roof over your heads and pay and have the food and have all that stuff in place. I mean, that by itself is beautiful.
Absolutely. Showing gratitude, I think, it helps you. It helps you mentally. It helps you become self-aware. I'm glad you said that, because that's one area that I wanted to talk to you about too, is gratitude. Like, who do you show the most gratitude in your path?
Me personally, that's interesting. Define gratitude.
Gratitude. Who do you, I guess, look back and maybe not attribute your success, but has supported you in becoming the person that you are today to get to that success?
Oh, my wife and son. No question. 100%. I mean, my wife is so much of a better human than me, and all the stuff that you see today for me has rubbed off from her. She's just beautiful that way. And being a father, particularly a father who wants to deliver and share with your children the way you expressed it, being a father where your ultimate thought process is to help deliver the most, to bring up the best, to be able to create this self-empowered individual that will be successful in life. I mean, there's nothing greater in terms of the gift. As a matter of fact, it took me a long time to figure out. I've got a team of people I work in both India and Philippines. And one of my longest term project managers is in the Philippines. I've actually never visited her. So in April, I'm taking a trip to the Philippines to visit my people. And it was one of those things that, like, I kind of woke up and said, why am I not doing this? Why? They're important to me. So because it was in the last year that I started taking on a couple more people. I think what happened is I realized the business is getting too busy and I want to grow it, and I don't want it to evolve around me. So I'm finding people in my organization that I'm doing one-on-ones with and giving them the type of product and service and love that I gave to my son. Like, here's what you need to do to be successful. Here's how we move forward. Here's where it's okay to make mistakes, and here's where you may have gone too far. And empowering people to be successful is beautiful. So to actually see them in person and feel that energy and let them feel my energy, that to me, I that's going to pay for itself so many times over when we get back. I'm still looking forward to it.
To close out the interview, to close out this beautiful conversation we're having, like, pretend you're talking specifically to the listener of Superior Nation. They're listening to you, and he or she is going through a rut right now. They're stuck in whatever position they are in their lives. They're looking for someone to come in a little bit and give them some confidence. They feel like their mission in life isn't defined enough for them. They have awoken from this cruise control state of life that they've been living, and they want to start finding their why. What would you say to them?
If you don't mind, let me give you that answer through the eyes of a publisher who has a process that's pretty cool. So if you go to ahathat.com/author, we have a 3-step writing process. And what I would do is, and step number 1 is a Word document where you fill out your name and title and what you want to write about. And potentially what I would do if I was you is make it a goal to interview 20, 25, 30 people for 15 minutes each, 20 minutes each, and say, how did you get to what was your purpose and how did you get there? Give me some thoughts and ideas of what you think I should do if you knew me well enough, right? And and the reason I'd say you could actually start writing a book without actually publishing it. Like we charge to publish, right? So you could actually start writing a book without publishing it. And by the way, if you're a student, we if you're publishing just an AHA book, we have a scholarship program. So I'll give a scholarship to any student. Teacher teaching at a university, I'll give a scholarship program too. So the interesting part is if you actually went and interviewed a bunch of people asking that question that you want an answer to, think about how many potential presents may come your way. And particularly if you're doing it, so I'm thinking about writing a book. I'm in the midst of writing it. I don't know if I'll ever publish it. You don't have to say that. Or I'm going to write a book and could you give me 15, 20 minutes and just answer questions? And then we in our writing process, we actually also have a writing school, so we can let you have comp access to the writing school, and you'll learn what it is. And it's not about the book. It's not about the writing. It's about the methodical path of saying and asking a bunch of people, how did they get there? Because once again, whether it's the gardener, the cleaning people, the police chief, you fill in the blank, you just don't know where that inspiration for you may come from. And if you set yourself a goal to talk to 25 people, I can guarantee that there'll be some presence that come in that journey.
Mitchell Levy, I want to say thank you. It's been an honor to have you on the show. How can people connect with you?
So I have, what's really interesting, I just ended up doing a brand new branding exercise. So I'm going to give one URL. It's mitchellevy360.com. So it's my name, MITCHELLLEVY 360.com. And there it'll reference my social media sites. So connect me on a social media platform that's relevant for you. The first video that pops up is a customer testimonial video. So you get a feeling of how we interact with our customers. But you could connect me on any social media platform. And if you didn't want to talk to me, but looking for content to share on social media, just go to ahathat.com, because we have 47,000 pieces of content for you to share. And it is free to use, free to share. And I'm excited to see people who grow, learn, and do new things with the content we have. Anyhow, Trey, thanks for the questions. This was a most unique conversation.
Well, I appreciate the answers because I know they're sometimes can be difficult, but I really love the content.
Oh, beautiful.
If you made it this far and you're listening to this message, you are a true Your Superior Self fan. This is a pretty long interview, but I loved every minute of it. It was very powerful, and I want to thank Mitchell for taking the time to come on the show and really help me and guide me towards becoming a better father and a better husband and a better entrepreneur. And I hope that you got the same type of value that I did today. I want to say thank you for listening. Thank you for hanging out with me and Mitchell. Please leave a rating and review wherever you get your podcasts from. Make sure to hit subscribe if you don't already. And please visit me on Instagram at tdowns80 and on Twitter at DownsTrey. Hit me up on Facebook at Trey Downs, DOWNES. And check out my business page, Your Superior Self. I hope you guys have a great week, and I can't wait to talk to you guys next time. Later.